So just kind of like touch base on last week a little bit. I mean, really just kind of just touching the surface of some concepts, and really talked about balance in the form of the human body, not just in like our capability. So we often, talk about balance, and people just immediately think we're talking about the ability to balance, like on one foot or on a balance beam. And we're making sure that we understand that balance in the human body is not a capability. It's literally how our body is structured and built. And it starts at the top always. So like we were looking at setup, and when I first see a hitter hit, the first thing I'm always going to look up is the setup of the swing. I do have a decent example of one of my hitters that came in last week. And you see when a hitter looks balanced, I think when people look at someone, they look balanced. Like I look balanced right here, but in hindsight, I'm actually pretty forward. And like you go, oh man, you look athletic, you look balanced, and immediately I'm actually very heavy on my right foot. And you can hardly tell. So I think balance is really easy to fool. So we're trying to find that center of gravity where everything is directly between the feet, and that's keeping the pressure, inside the feet instead of outside of the feet. And you start seeing a big rock back, big shift back. We talked about, having a move that is not shifting outside of the back foot, and pretty much any part of your body that's getting outside of your back foot, even the hands, can be constituted as getting out of balance in the human body. So we were showing examples of Jose Altuve here, and we were drawing lines off a bunch of hitters on their back foot, and you watch during those lifts, as they lift, everything stays inside that back foot, even the hands. And then they get set, but even as that's happening, since it's on the forward move, now everything has just maintained its integrity inside that back foot. Very balanced position here. And we also talked about be cautious on looking at some of these films, because a lot of Major League film is taken at an awkward angle. It's a slightly offset angle. So where like this camera is not perfectly on that hitter's chest straight off of him. So there's going to be a little bit of a skew to how you're going to see things a little bit. So we can't sit here and cookie cut a still frame because it's in an awkward position. So it's just important to have that information when you're looking at a swing. The angle you're looking at a swing might alter how your eyes see it. So, and we see that a lot in big league swings, because the cameras are typically slightly offset rather than being like perfectly in like that dugout position. But that was kind of part of balance that we talked about, was having a balanced setup that leads into a balanced move. And you can watch Mookie here. He's really one of the better guys at not loading over the back foot and keeping everything inside that back foot and making a positive move to balance. We talked a little bit about hitting from 50-50. Is really, that's balance, right? Like we're trying to get to a balanced hitting position that's 50-50. And you've heard plenty of hitters. Bonds was a huge proponent of 60-40, 60-40. And some guys can get away with that, and some guys feel 60-40, but they're actually hitting from 50-50. So if you have a lot of hitters, like I have plenty of hitters that are hearing the information of getting to 50-50, get to balance, and they're actually getting onto the front foot too much, then now I might be, okay, you're trying to work to 50-50, but you're actually landing on your front foot and losing your backside during that process. That might be a guy that I go, okay, can we think more of like a 60-40 feeling to kind of meet in the middle a little bit and find that happy medium and balance. We talked about individualization and being able to look at hitters individually instead of just as a group, which is not easy in team settings, right? It's not. So that's where I come in. That's where I can help you guys individualize your work with each hitter and empower them with the tools and understanding of their swing, so that when they show up, they know what drills that they need to do to get better, and they know how to execute those drills to get better. I mean, that's the whole point, is how many hitters hit outside of practice? How many hitters go over to DBAT? I mean, Edgar was there 5 times a day, it seemed like. I mean, it was way too much. Yeah, and now they're going to give him a chance to hit there, but I don't know how long that'll last. His mind up here definitely better on the mound, but he's dirty on the mound too. But yeah, I mean, so they're going elsewhere to go hit, and if you just go swing and show up, I would argue that most of those guys are getting worse doing it. So by giving each hitter that, just small, simple drills or thoughts that apply to their swings, they're going to get better doing that for darn sure. And everyone works on their own to a certain degree, so we want to make sure that they know what they're doing when they're on their own. I always challenge hitters that I work with a lot to, if you like, most have a tee at their house. I mean, I would assume most have a tee. I don't want to say everyone, but most do. And when they go out and hit off a tee, they usually don't warm up. They usually just go swing. They usually don't have a plan. If they have a couple drills, they might do. And then I would even argue that they probably hit off the tee incorrectly, and we'll go over some of that today a little bit. But I challenge, if they're going to hit off tees, and I think they should, because it's, if you're at home and you got nothing to do, go swing a bat. But if you're going to hit off a tee for a half hour, you should do mirror work for a half hour before that. Because I would like to see like 50-50 on tee work and mirror work would be fantastic, because mirror is instant feedback. Mirror is you can actually watch yourself do it as it's happening. Film is great. I think we actually talked about this a little bit last week. Film is great, but it's after the fact. It's after it happened, opposed to what's actually happening as I'm moving. That's where you can start to see kind of feel versus real. So we talk about not shifting back, and learning how to move without shifting is not easy for some, myself included. I'm actually a lot better at it right-handed than left-handed. I think I showed you guys that last week as well. And the mirror to me is just so vital, because all of a sudden I get my eyes on the mirror and I'm watching myself move, and I can just see where a certain positioning of my body can be a little bit different, and immediately it cleans it up. And that's something, I'm writing in my notes. And that was something we didn't cover last week, that I think every hitter should do, because hitting is hard enough as it is. And there's so much information out there. I think every single hitter should have a hitter's journal. It's mandatory for the hitters I work with, is that they better have a journal. And if they don't, I don't really want to work with them anyways, because that means they don't care enough. So starting a hitter's journal, really, I mean, you can just call it a baseball journal if you want, but I would write down everything you possibly learned in there, or that you can remember, and then things that worked, you're circling them. Man, that really, really worked that day. I'm circling that. I'm going to remember that. Things that didn't work, maybe Coach so-and-so said this and it wasn't for me, and then I'm writing it down and I'm crossing it out. That's not for me. But just creating your own understanding and putting things into your own words, it's enormous for learning individually. And it's, when I was 13, 14, I never would have done it. I mean, I was hitting 30 home runs a year, and it was, I'm going to be a big leaguer. I don't need to do this. And I wish so bad now I did. I started one when I was a coach, but as a player, I wish I would have done it. And you watch, like, a lot of these professionals that come in my cage in the off season are coming in with their journals, and some of them just use their phone for notes, but they want to remember what clicked. They want to remember that feeling or that thought or that movement change or whatever it is for when things go bad. Hitting's easy when you're raking. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. It's like the ball looks big, and everything we're hitting is finding a gap or a hole, and it feels great, right? But the second hitting we start to struggle, it's panic city. I actually got one of my guys right now kind of struggling a little bit, and he was like National League Player of the Week, and then he was Rookie of the Month, and he's in the running for Rookie of the Year this year. And he went from 260 to 235 in the last 10, 11 games. And you can just kind of see things start to spin a little bit. Everything starts to kind of speed up on you. Next thing you know, you almost kind of forget how you're standing in the box and holding the bat, and it's something you've done your entire life. So it's very important to write things down and remember what worked for you. You went 0 for 4, and you look back and you're like, man, I was 3 for 4 with 2 home runs and a double, or 2 doubles and a home run. And I remember how slow and easy I felt. I remember that my swings felt 70% smooth, effortless. And right now I can feel even how hard I'm holding the bat, and everything's kind of grinding a little bit. I like the word grind. Grind is a really good word in hitting that we use a lot, because the body can either work with fluidity and athleticism and speed naturally, or it can kind of grind against itself. So when you start seeing, and we've all seen them, you see that swing, you're like, that looks kind of grindy. It just looks like you're fighting something. And that could be setup, that could be mobility, that could be what he's been taught or over taught or under taught. So it's a little bit different. So you hear the word grind, it's probably in the context of a bad swing or a bad movement within that swing. So we don't like grindy swings. We like them to flow like Mr. Mookie Betts here. That's a pretty special athlete. I think I saw that he rolled like a 300 in bowling or something. Just absurd athlete. It's just crazy, yeah. Just super good athlete. So is there any questions based on the idea of moving in balance? Just kind of based off last week and just kind of our understanding of getting into balance, like moving in balance, having a setup that's balanced, a stride and a move to the ground that's balanced, and then obviously through the swing. So we want balanced setup, balanced move, balanced swing, and it's all top down. It starts at the head. It starts at the very top of the body, and it's going to work the way down into the ground. But that balanced position, that 50-50 positioning that we're looking at, that's pretty good right there. That's head in the center of the body, body's between the feet, hands inside back foot. So we talk about sequencing, and this is kind of something that we'll kind of start moving off of balance and talking about sequencing, because there's a million different ways to stride. There's a lot of different hand positions or ways that people load. You got guys that just kind of go from one position and stay there, like kind of like a Bregman type swing. You got guys that have a ton of moving pieces like Edgar Martinez or Gary Sheffield, and then boom. So, oftentimes when hitters come in the cage, we'll tell them, hey, I don't care if you start your hands above your head, as long as you're here in a good hitting position on time and you can do it consistently and you prove that over time against every level of pitching. Why would I change that? That's what you do, and it works for you. That's who you are. I actually had Nate Clow, he's a USC kid, came in the cage with me in August for the first time, and the first thing he said to me was that he had a lot of moving pieces in his swing, and he was like, I just think it might be too much for me. I think I need to simplify my movements, and I'm a big proponent for simple. I think simple is great, but sometimes when you have moving pieces that are just kind of natural to you, then why would we take those away? So I think this is him, but he's got a little bit of kind of like that kind of waggle kind of flow to it, and we didn't take that away, but what we did do was we got him more in balance in the setup, which allowed him to link up the hand load, and that's where you kind of see that little flow of that kind of load there. That was really early, that was nice, but you see he kind of catches that thing at a time where he can kind of get to a spot and then kind of hold it rather than kind of like being rushed, right? And he was constantly late and rushed, couldn't pull a ball in the air to save his life last year, and it was because he was all lead arm dominant, and he's pull side with front arm, and he's late timing, and that shift back is what was creating that. I don't know if I have a side view right here of him. Find it. But sequencing a swing is the sequencing is basically like what you do from your setup through your load and stride to your launch position. So like somebody's sequence is off, whether it's because of when they're loading their hands or how they're loading their hands, or the back shift is getting in the way of when they do that. Because a lot of times, if I tell a hitter to take their hands back and their weight back, like I'd say 95% of every kid hears when they're 5-6 years old is, oh yeah, what do you got to do? You got to take your weight back and take your hands back. Well, now I'm immediately getting upper body engaged too early, and I'm outside of my back foot. Now I'm out of balance for sure. And the whole sequence becomes off at that point, and they do it for years and years and years, and that becomes very difficult to get rid of. It becomes really hard to change the pattern that he's created from such a young age, especially the older you get. So sequence is pretty much everything from setup to launch position as I land before I actually swing the bat. And it's really everything to me. I think that how we move leading up to swinging the bat is going to be directly correlated with how you swing the bat. And obviously time plays a giant role there as well. If you don't have enough time, you're going to skip some things and you're going to cheat your swing, and that's when we get ourselves out. That's when we panic. And we talked a little bit about no panic, and it's probably the best thing to tell any hitter is that get your best swing off, don't panic. is that if you can get up there and you can tell me that you're getting your best swing off and you're not panicking, your odds of success are going to go up just by nature, because panic swings are real. They happen all the time. And a lot of hitters panic swing every time they've ever swung a bat and just don't know it. And we have a lot of hitters that just do it every single time, because that's just how they've moved the bat from such a young age. And creating sequences, you look at all my hitters look different. You would watch these sequences. This one's a little bit more of like a foot reach, and then the body shifts to center. You keep scrolling through it, you're just going to see a completely different move, more of a leg lift, and then a very simple hands. This guy is sitting here literally trying not to take his hands back at all. His thoughts on what he tries to do in his swing personally goes against what most hitting coaches would tell everyone, is I want you to literally feel like your hands stay here the entire time. And you can see that just by thinking that, the hands will naturally get back into a great hitting position. That's a pretty darn good hitting position, pretty balanced. You can tell the hands are in a pretty strong position here, and you see how it's a pretty clean entry coming through. I mean, that's a pretty good swing there. So you just scroll through. Everyone's different though. I mean, this is a little bit different move here, a little bit more like Trout, kind of up and out a little bit. It's Cole Miller at University of Washington, and you just kind of see that just balanced hitting position. And I think that if I kept going through different hitters, you would see commonalities, but you would still see the differences amongst every guy. But sequencing, the easiest thing to do when you start seeing the guys that take their hands way outside their back foot is to eliminate the back shifts. And I got a pretty good example of this from the other day, so I'm going to pull it up really quick with. No, it's actually it's JT Ricken. I don't know if you know the Rickens. He's a Sweets kid. He was just committed to Gonzaga, and just decommitted. You know, these kids, they go out to area code and they see all the big name schools, and he was like, I just want to go to a bigger school. I'm like, Gonzaga's a big school. Like, what are you talking about? Like, that's a great school, and you had a good scholarship there, but, you know, you got to go. You got to trust your gut. You know, I don't know if I agree with the decision, but it's not my life, right? I can only give you so much. But you see that shift back. You see that kind of you start to see like the hip and knee and shoulder get over the back foot. That's definitely a sign. We call it pedestal. It's like you're sitting everything over that foot instead of inside the foot. You start to see the hands will start to leak outside that kind of foot a little bit. You start to see the front shoulder get a little divey from that position. It's like a counterbalance kind of move, and just kind of fighting his body. You can kind of see a guy that's like 6'2", landing in a really small hitting position. He just doesn't look his size here. And it's just constantly a little bit more panic than you like to see. And you know, he was a guy, a good example. He played in the area code games, and he's a guy that against high school pitching in like summer and stuff, he demolishes pitching. And you know, you get against the best guys in the country at area codes, and he struggled quite a bit. And really, he comes in the cage. This is last week, and this is the first time he came back in since area code. And he's like, man, that shift back killed me against that kind of pitching. So it just, you know, if a hitter does this here, if they have a big giant shift back and they smash high school pitching, I'm still going to want to change it, because I know that eventually pitching will beat that. Eventually pitching will beat him here. And when you think about it, I like talking about it just in the context of time. You know, first base coaches, they got their stopwatches going. And in Washington State, I think probably maybe more than other parts of the country, our pitchers are taught to slide step. Like, everyone is really quick to the plate. You know, maybe it's just because the catchers that we get here just aren't as good. You know, some of them are great, but as a whole, I would say our catching's pretty poor here in our state. So, like, catchers need help. Like, pitchers can't take a 1-5 to the plate and expect a catcher with a 2-2 to throw anybody out, right? So, by all means, the game of time there becomes really relevant, because in terms of, like, let's say I got a pitcher that's slide stepping, and from handbrake to delivering the pitch to the catcher's glove, he's a 1-1, which is very fast. And let's say how much time does it take him to get back here and then actually get back to the center of gravity? in relationship to that. So like if his move and his swing takes more than 1.1 seconds just to get back to the center, then he's screwed every single time he ever faces a guy that's that fast to the plate. He's never going to hit well off those kind of guys. And there's just a lot of room for error in that. So it's kind of a game of time and just that sense is how long does it take that guy to deliver that pitch? Because you really can't get going until handbrake. And we'll talk more about timing off of handbrake as we get going. There's such thing as going too early. Got some guys that actually start to leg kick as this leg's coming up. Everyone's seen Stroman and Cueto and the guys that can just mess with your timing like there's no tomorrow. But if you're not watching any of that and all you're watching is handbrake, then they can't mess with you anymore. So game of time. So here's the beginning of this is like just him doing normal kind of pickup here, and you see the big shift and kind of the sway. And when you look at this setup here, it looks balanced to me. Like when you look at this with a naked eye, it does have looks athletic, looks balanced, but you can start to kind of see where the weight is. If you start to zoom in, you can really start to see that we're heavier on that front foot. That knees drops down a little bit here on the front leg. This looks a little bit taller just by the look of it. But then immediately you can just tell because he's got a shift just to pick the foot up off the ground. I like Griffey a lot. Obviously growing up around here, we got to love Griffey. But you see Griffey when he was hitting, he had that light front foot. There was that kind of rhythm with it that he always had that I always tried to emulate growing up because he was the man. But there's that light front foot. So if I'm light on the front foot, where's my weight most likely? Right, my weight's definitely closer to here, center to back foot, and you can kind of see it kind of goes from center to the back foot, and that really immediately kind of flows into a good quality move. And vice versa, when you looked at his setup that's heavy there, is that there's a lot of weight on that foot. So to get the foot in the air, the body actually has to shift to the back foot just to get that foot in the air, right? So immediately, and you see a lot of Dominicans do it. I don't know who taught them it or why, but they do it, is they kind of have that front heel off the ground. And it's not comfortable for a lot of people, so it's not like I'm forcing everyone to do that. But if I have a hitter like JT here that I've worked with for a couple years now that really still fights it and struggles with it, we kind of messed around in this round and was like, hey, I want you to just do something and see what happens. And we have film running so we can kind of see it and see what happens with it. But when you scroll back and watch it, he actually lifted his front heel off the ground now. And this is crazy because this is the best he's ever moved in terms of a pickup here, and it was just a trial and error. It was like, okay, let's lift the front heel off the ground and then pick up, and immediately watch the difference here on the pickup. It's not even comparable to me. Like that right there is a very, very, very strong pickup. There's very limited shift. It's very, very subtle. It's you don't see that kind of slide look to it. That right there is really, it's dynamic. It's stable. It's strong. And now he's going to be able to make a stronger move to balance, and everything just functions better from there. So it's really that's just a cheat trick for teaching somebody not to shift back. Really quickly, I think I'm going to show you guys a really simple drill that I like personally. I do need a demonstrator. You want to pop up real quick? So if you're the hitter, oftentimes someone that's shifty is I tell them, go and get your setup. And what you're going to do is I'm going to push on your front arm as you make your pickup. And if you're a shifter, you might fall back that way, but you're not going to fall over. You see how you shift off? Mm-hmm. So now resist that move as you lift. And now you're going to feel everything stay inside of that back foot. It's just a really good feeling. Now pick up. See how you're still not holding it strong? Now hold it strong. There it is. So it's the feeling of like trying to resist going backwards. Kind of fight or flight to me a little bit on that. It is like you see I'm unsure, I want to see it first. And there's a verbal that you're going to hear me say a lot. It's go to see. Go make your move to see the ball. And it's human nature to want to see it before I move. I want to see what happens. Is it going to come at my head? Is it going to be a nasty breaking ball? We want to see it before we commit to it. And I think that's just human nature in general, is people want to see to believe. And in hitting, we don't have time. We don't, especially when you start facing great pitchers. We have to make that move to see. So you're going to hear me use that verbiage a ton, is go to see versus see to go. So I'll do a voiceover and I'm looking at a guy and I'm like, you can just see to go. He's trying to see it before he goes instead of go to see. And we got a lot of hitters that will come in the cage that have really good swings now, and you really just, you hear them only say a few things. Like after a swing, it's like, I just trying to see to go there instead of going to see. I mean, Cole Hinkleman, Stanford University, this guy can flat out hit a ball really far. And right now, he's pretty dialed in right now with what he's doing. And really, the only thing you really ever hear him say is just, I'm just kind of late, stuck late, see to go rather than go to see. So it's just another verbiage for you're late making your move. Kind of scrolling through here for a sec, see if I can find the different one. I know there was one in this round. Let's get there. See to go. Yeah, there it is. So you kind of see it in the hips. Like you see how the hips want to get started before the ground. They start to kind of leak out here, and this is a really good sign for him of when he is late. So he can actually go back and look at his game swings, because they have those game swings ready for you after your games to go look at. And you see that since he's late on his move here, you see that that ball's out of my hand and he's reaching for the ground. He's late, and next thing you know, the backside wants to kind of spin. Front hip wants to leak out, and next thing you know, you're going to cross your body, and there's your pull side ground ball. So you can see how spinny he looks there anyways. I just think that verbiage you're going to hear me talk about a ton, go to see. That's late as well, but no panic. So you can be late. My guys can be late, not panic, still hit balls very, very well. The key is as pitching gets better, we don't see it as good. And especially with some of the driveline stuff that these guys are doing, where they're literally making fastballs and breaking balls look the exact same for a long period of time, and then they go in different directions. And that it's just, the harder it is to see, the more vital it is to make that move earlier to see it better. Having a balanced move that's on time will promote better vision. 100% will promote better vision. It is an absolute guarantee. I wonder if I have it on this one or the other one. Where are you? Might be on my phone. Is there any questions on that? Any questions on anything I just talked about? I mean, just feel free and throw it out there. I tend to kind of move on to different concepts as we go pretty quickly, just because they all kind of correlate, right? That's the thing about hitting, is they all correlate.
We were talking about movement on handbrake.
Yep.
And so all the sequencing stuff is pretty much your timing of getting your body in the right position. Is that? And that's all
yeah.
What you're talking about is going off handbrake instead of going off what I think a lot of us were taught. And when a pitcher lifts his leg, you show him your hip. When he shows you his, you show him yours. And you're talking about doing that a little bit later, right? That's way back, right?
Yeah. So.
Right. 20s, yeah.
It's really relative to each hitter's move, right? So Bellinger, I'm gonna have to pull out the other iPad, but Bellinger, oh, here it is. This is good. So Bellinger, we all know in Bellinger's move that he doesn't shift back at all. He starts with his feet together, pretty close at least, and so he really just makes a forward move, right? Like Longoria's in the similar realm. A lot of old school guys, Babe Ruth and guys like that, were all similar to that, where they really just kind of go forward to hit. We do a lot of Bellinger drill just to teach a hitter not to shift and make their move forward to hit. And I think that Bellinger's a good example of this, because this was in his 2019 when he was an MVP, and you see the pitcher is at the top of his lift. Oh, what is going on? It might be a GIF. These GIFs are a little bit tougher. Oh, there it is. So here we are, and when you look at pitch release, you see the move out on release of pitch. So with Bellinger's move, if he got going on the handbrake or on the leg lift, he would be excessively early, right? He'd be way too early. Like someone like Acuna, who has pretty good sized leg kick and a pretty decent shift back. He stays inside the back foot, so it remains in balance, but he definitely hits better off of a guy in the set position because he tends to simplify that move just by nature. I wasn't the one that came up with that. I just know that for a fact because somebody sent me the videos to prove it. But it's all about figuring out what that move needs to be to match the ball. Timing is an event, right? Like there's a ball moving towards you, and then you are moving out to your balanced position, and we're trying to meet that ball at a certain time, right? And a lot of hitters that come to us, whether they think getting up on the lift or the handbrake, they're typically not even getting up until the ball's being thrown. You see it a ton in flippies. You're doing flips. I catch myself not even flipping sometimes because I'm like this. I'm like, the hitter hasn't moved yet. Like that, you're late immediately. Why would I already feed you a ball if you're going to just teach yourself to be late every time? So I catch myself like not even throwing it and going, do you feel how late you are? Like I'm about to release that and you haven't even moved yet. But it does depend on that hitter's moving pieces. Somebody with a little bit more movement, a little bit more of a leg kick, a little bit more of a back shift, they're going to want to start more on handbrake. Justin Turner's probably the earliest in the game on his forward move, and Trout Conforto's actually pretty late on it, really late right now. And so it's relative to each guy's sequence on when they would get going. We oftentimes use handbrake as like the starting point, and then like we would take a Ballinger and be like, yeah, if you go handbrake, that's too early. Probably more of like arm up, arm forward, or something along those lines. So it's kind of important to know the hitter's moving pieces before you're going to be like, oh, you need to go on handbrake, because some guys might be a little bit different there. But we use handbrake as like the marker, and the reason is because the ball's moving.
So if we're trying to figure out what our guys are doing, starting there is a good place to start.
Yeah,
yeah. And then finding out whether it needs to be sooner or later.
Rear view film to me is one of my favorite. You kind of need the context of side view when you're looking at rear view because it can kind of fool you in a reach. So stride reach to me is when the body stays back and the foot goes out. That's kind of like a reach, and now I'm stuck on my back foot. Now you can look at a Paul Goldschmidt, you can look at Nelson Cruz, Ohtani right now, and those guys have a reachy stride, but they don't hit from this position. They actually shift back to center before they fire, and so that's, to me, is still a balanced move because the body's still moving with the head in the center of the body. The hitters that are reach sit here and they stuck on the back foot. Now my head's over my back leg, and that's when I'm going to spin out and I'm out of balance. And I lose a lot of different things that we're going to promote in terms of like direction and power. So that's a really good question. I like your question a lot there. I just think it's definitely a good starting point is handbrake because I don't want you moving before the ball moves. Like if you have rhythm or something like pre-pitch rhythm like Griffey, that's all fine. But in terms of like getting your stride up, if your stride's going up before that pitcher breaks his hands, that pitcher can mess with your timing all day long. Johnny Cueto, Stroman would have a heyday with you. And you know, you see the random kids in high school that do that kind of randomly. Not a lot, but some. I don't know why they all don't. Maybe they're not athletic enough to do it, but you know, some of the pitchers are fairly non-athletic.
So
but
for, again, just game time commentary, if your guys are constantly late, what do you don't want to get in their heads, obviously, what are you trying to do in terms of getting them focused on changing their time and get them a little bit earlier?
I think from a standpoint, if I was talking to my entire team, like we go through the lineup in that first couple innings, and it's like, man, every one of us was late. Then it's like, okay, now it's like bring everyone up, and it's like, guys, every single one of you wants to see that ball thrown before you make your move. You're letting the pitcher control your timing instead of you controlling your timing. We got to get going earlier. We got to get up earlier. We got to make our move to see. You know, we're trying to promote that earlier timing. For some hitters, we can even go into the fact of like, well, let's try and turn on the ball. You know, like let's actually try and go up there for an AB and go pull side home run. One of my best friends, he's with the Texas Rangers, and they have a superstar in AAA that he'll be in the show next year. But he got in a little bit of a 2-3 game funk, and that was probably a pretty big funk for that guy. But you know, Cody's literally just says, "I want you to turn on this thing as far as you can to left field," and the guy goes oppo home run, and you're just like, well, that worked. But he thinking he's going to do that got him to do that. So sometimes you might use an extreme thing. Like, I want to see, can you pull this ball for a home run foul? And in my head, I'm like, do I really want him to pull a home run foul? Probably not, right? Like, we're just trying to offset and find that happy medium. But sometimes using extremes can really help with that. It kind of goes into a similar context to like when you're using some of these high spin rate machines. You use a hack attack at 90 miles an hour, the spin rate's at 4,000 RPMs. No one in big leagues throws a fastball above 3,100, 33,000 RPMs. Like 2,900 is usually really high backspin, like almost rise ball-esque. So we crank these things up to 4,000 RPM, 90 mile an hour fastballs, and every hitter's underneath. So then you're like, okay, well then aim on the top of the ball, and then they foul it off on the bottom. You're like, all right, swing and miss a foot above the ball, and then bam, line drive. It's like, this just feel versus real, and sometimes we have to go to complete other side to get somebody to feel that. I honestly think it's why chopping and swinging down so much kind of gotten blown out of proportion and taken to another extreme. Guys like Ted Williams for a long time were, on plane through plane, which I think everybody wants that. It's just how you say things to get that to happen is different. And in today's day and age of hitting, you see all the drive line, all the pull side, swing up at the ball, and you got half of Major League Baseball that's been, like, I would say like 95% of the Hall of Fame hitters, and I don't know this for a fact, I'm just guessing, but like 95% of that Hall of Fame in Major League Baseball, filled with guys like Chipper Jones and those kind of guys, they all thought swing down. Now, the product wasn't that they were swinging down and making contact on the way down. It's just what they thought that generated, obviously, a really good swing. So it's in that realm of feel versus real, and I think it applies to timing in game, and it applies to quick adjustments. And I think that some of the technology has made hitters, at least certain hitters, like not aware of their misses. They don't feel it or see it. We growing up, we're just, where am I missing? Okay, I'm late on everything. I got to hit the ball that way, and I'm hitting it that way. Or I'm missing under everything. It's like, I'm missing under everything. I got to get on top. And we make those adjustments pretty quickly back then. At least it felt quick at times, but nowadays it's like pulling teeth at times just to make a hitter do something different. But I think that's where a good hitting coach can explain things in a different way, or maybe get a hitter to believe that one thing's happening, but we're really trying to get another thing to have happen, naturally. So the best adjustments we ever make are going to be natural adjustments. Is going to be like, what does that kid do naturally already, and how can I promote that to maybe get him to do this that I want him to do without actually telling him to do it. If I can get him to do what I want him to do without telling him to do it, he's going to learn it with his body and his mind naturally. He's not going to have to think about it. And in hitting, we talked about it last week, hitting is the most reactionary skill in all of sports. It is purely subconscious. Yogi Berra has that weird quote. What was that weird quote he always said about like mental? It was like 90% of the game was I don't know, some bad math is whatever it was. And really, to me, I think that like that applies because obviously hitters think way too much. Like some of the best hitters I've ever seen or ever coached are some of the dumbest kids I know. Some of the worst hitters I've ever dealt with are really smart kids. And it's not always the same. It's just like you can just tell the guys that are up there thinking all the time rather than the guys that are just see ball, hit ball, and react. And it's a reactionary game. You don't have time to think. It's proven you don't have time to think at 90 miles an hour. At 90 miles an hour, you literally don't have time to take a thought. As you basically have, 0.34 against 95, and it's like 0.22 to have an actual thought. You're screwed. You have no chance. So really, to me, it's all about timing, but it's timing individually for that hitter. And obviously if they can't repeat what they're doing consistently, then we got to make a change. Like maybe it's simplifying, maybe it's changing the stride mechanism. It's like, hey, son, you've leg kicked your entire life and you've never been very good at it. You've never been consistent with that. What happens if we just do a regular pick it up and drop stride? Does that clean everything up? Do you see it better? Are you more consistent? Are you more in balance? Are you more on time? If you're on time more often and you see the ball better, you're going to hit better. Like no one can argue that to me. Is that if you see it better and you're on time more consistently, you will hit it better. You're making your task easier. Still not easy though. Round ball, round bat. But how many hitters come up to you guys in the games and are constantly like, what do you see? What's wrong with my swing? That one kills me. I see it all the time. I had a kid at Woodinville High School. I don't know if you remember Hunter Cook.
Oh, yeah.
Hunter Cook. The kid would, bless his heart, you'd hit a line drive, the center fielder, probably for him, he wasn't super strong, probably 90, in his heyday at 11, 12th grade, and 90 line drive right at him. He'd come back and tell, what's wrong with my swing? What do you mean? You just hit it right at him. That one just kills me. But those are the ones that typically they're thinking too much. You're like, dude, you hit a ball hard. That's all that matters. And I usually ask the question too. I'm like, would you rather hit 4 balls really hard and go 0 for 4, or would you rather get jammed 4 times and go 4 for 4? Or roll over. I think I usually use the rollover because sometimes getting jammed in like with a no panic swing can lead to some offside weaker hits that are frustrating to the pitcher, but we'll take those when we get them. But the pull side rollover is typically going to be more of the panic that we see, and it's like, would you rather go 4 in a row in that 6-hole or 4-hole, depending righty or lefty, than getting 4 rockets right at someone? And you can see that like they want to answer correctly, they get it, but you can just tell the ones that would rather go 4 for 4 with 4 rollovers, and depending on the context, if it's a championship game, shoot, yeah, I want the 4 for 4, 4 rollover base hits, we're going to be productive there. But one tends to lead to a slump, and one tends to keep you locked in as long as you don't freak out about it. You don't get any hits, but you hit rockets. Like, you should be walking away from that game like, I got my best swing off 4 times. I hit 4 rockets, feel great. Next game, they're all going to fall. Eventually, it evens itself out.
Any suggestions on how to have that conversation with the kid, especially maybe younger kids that hit 4 rockets in a row and think they suck?
I think with the younger kids, the conversation is probably better with the parents, which is unfortunate. Parents tend to see stats like more than the kids really do, especially with Game Changer. My Game Changer is really like for the stats side of things, it's all locked. My parents can't even see it. If they want to have a conversation about his stats or his at bats that he's getting because of little Johnny's getting more at bats than little Jimmy, then I'll pull up the stats and show him like this is what he's earned and why, kind of a thing. But that's a tough one because I think some of that starts at home. I think Dad would rather see the 4 for 4 with 4 rollovers than the 4 rockets that 0 for 4. Even though in the long scheme of things, the 0 for 4 with 4 rockets obviously probably has a much better application to his career. But that's a tough one. With the kids, I think it's making them aware of quality at bats, right? We talk about QABs all the time, and I think if you don't talk about QABs, you're crazy. And I know you guys already do. QABs to me is so vital because I think it takes the pressure off of like, having to go hit 350. I also talk a lot about my career at that because at 13, like I said, I was a big leaguer at 13. I didn't play past 21 years old. And it's like, guys, like at that age, like there's not a, I would have gone to any school in today's game, probably would have gone to any school I wanted to now. At 8th grade, I was like an All-American. But back then, like no one asked for your stats. No one cared about your stats. And I would still argue that now they don't either. At 13, 14 years old, they just don't care about your stats then. That you might see a couple 14-year-old 8th graders committing to some Division Is, which I still think is absurd. But you see it. You definitely see it for sure. Mississippi State's like, they got multiple 8th graders committed every year. But how many of those kids actually end up going there? I don't know. But I would say that not all of them, that's for sure. Oregon State's pretty notorious for that. Our work with Oregon State. Remember Drew Sears? Good old, yeah, there's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of them. But yeah, that's a tough one. I just think the awareness of what your goal really is. If your goal is to get a hit, that's an issue, right? Like that's not process orientated. Hit is just an outcome. Hit is a byproduct of you hitting a ball in a place that you can't control. So I think making them aware that it's a process that leads to more hits over a long period of time. It sucks because of all the showcases, right? These showcases. I had one kid who went to I'm about to call NWACS. What's the deal in Oregon? Baseball Northwest. I always mess up the name. But Baseball Northwest, and he goes out there in Medford, and it's like, what? It's like really smoky. You can hardly see. It's freaking 100 degrees. And you get like 10 at bats, right? Like you're going to let 10 at bats define your career. You're going to let 10 at bats like make you feel like a bad hitter. I don't remember the kid's name. I think it was Paxton. It was Paxton Bigby. That's who it was. Paxton. He was frustrated because he was like 2 for 10 or something, and he's kind of he's like the guy that wants to get a hit. And you're just like, dude, did you hit a couple balls hard right at people that got caught? Yeah. All right, then you easily could have been 5 for 10. That's pretty good. So it's that small sample size that we try and stay away from. It's not about that, And I got guys in my lineup, like just like you guys do, where they might be hitting 250, but their QABs are 400, they're 450, right? And the guy next to him that's not starting in the championship game, that his thing says 330, but all his hits are like this, and they're all against bad pitching, and they all, it's like it's inflated, right? It's like you haven't proven that you can beat the better guy, and this guy's getting jobs done. I think just making the hitters aware of that we see those things as coaches. As coaches, we see that you've hit 10 rockets in a row right at somebody, and you're snake bent like there's no tomorrow. Those are going to fall eventually. The guy that does that for an entire season, you better go do something to get that bad luck off of you, because it doesn't tend to happen like that.
As a culture, as a club, I love your question, Kyle, because I think for us, it's everything for us, right? We always want to win, especially when we play the Bandits. But when we don't, we always focus on hard hits and quality at bats, right? And the other guy that go 0 for 4, but like he hit the ball to the fence every single time, and we're applauding that guy and saying great job and all that kind of good stuff. So AJ's lit that role too. And I think it's just good for us as a club to reward those hard hits and not so much. Hey, you look at the averages and the parents are like, how come my kid's not hitting fourth? He's batting 400. I'm like, yeah, because he's not hitting the ball hard, and that guy needs to be putting the ball in play hard.
Yep.
Get guys in. So I think it's a good point as a club.
Yeah.
For us. I know a lot of you guys do that anyway, but it's good for us to focus on the hard hits more so than the batting averages and everything else.
Definitely a good reiteration of what you guys are already doing, right? But it's good, because I think sometimes we lose control of that with the parents, and it's like we almost need to educate them more than the player, but really it's about the player. So.
And we have it on our 18 lineup sheet. I can send that out.
Yeah, I have my chart as well. Yeah.
Hard hits, and we literally track them.
Well, yeah, I always make my POs do it.
We do it ourselves, and we always miss, and the kids tell us like, "Yeah, it was a hard hit." I'm like, really?
Yeah, it's the best. All right, let me find that. You out of here?
See you, Jeremiah.
Good to see you.
Take care. Thanks.
Are we back to 8 next Saturday?
Yeah, back to 8 next Saturday. Yeah.
I know it was a parent problem though, 'cause it was my kid.
Oh yeah, right. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like some of it's a high standard, right? Like these kids that are they really truly want to be great, and when they struggle a little bit, there's definitely that frustration. And to me, frustration is good. It just depends on how you show it. If you're the one that's yelling the F-bomb running down the line, or throwing the helmet and making everyone else look bad, unacceptable, right? That's not going to be put up with in general anyways. I know you guys wouldn't put up for that either. But if there's frustration there, I think that's a good thing, because it shows they care. It shows that they want to be great. But it's a fine line. It's definitely a fine line.
You're right. We don't have. I can't remember in the last 5 to 10 years when a college coach ever asked us, "Hey, can you send us the stats?"
Yeah. Never. Like even at the 18-year level, really.
I have the kids that say, "What do you want your stats to be? You want to bat 400?"
Yeah, no, seriously. Yeah. Exactly. Oh man, yeah, it's exactly like they'll make their own decision based on watching you play, and that was my career as well. I'm 17, 18 years old. I still hit 450 to 500 every single season, and the guy next to me getting a Division I offer, and he's hitting 300 and I was hitting 500, and I'm like, what's wrong with this here? Problem was I looked like this and he looked like that. It was a little bit different on that front, but those are the things that I talk about. You guys' nutrition stuff, it's awesome. I love it. Kind of move forward here in talking about bat path. I think bat path to me is really the most important piece of your swing, is having a good bat path. What constitutes a good bat path, right? Like what would we assume that is a good bat path? Like what's the end goal for a good bat path? I think you hear the generic things, right? Like short to, long through. That's very generically said, and I think that's a great terminology, is that I'm trying to be short to and long through, but you can kind of start to dig into that. And you're like, okay, well, short to what? And, you know, the short to the ball argument to me is where I think a lot of guys that taught chopping and steep swings and coming down, like I was taught growing up. So short to what? Like, are you short to the ball? Are we short to the back of the plate? Or are we short to the catcher's glove? Like, we've got to constitute what short to long through really truly means. Long through what? Right? So I think most people nowadays understand the plane, right? So there's the plane of the pitch. The pitch is coming in on a certain plane. Now, if you're just talking fastball, that's a four-seam, pretty straight fastball, that plane is really straight, right? And all of a sudden, you know, now the slider plane changes plane here, the changeup plane here, sinker there, you know, breaking ball here. Like, so the plane's going to change, and that's why hitting with adjustability in our swing is so important. But just in relationship to hitting a fastball and having as much opportunity to be off time and still hit a ball well, we talk about having a short swing to the plane of the pitch, not to the pitch. Because a lot of times if I'm swinging at the ball and the ball changes direction because it turns into a changeup or a sinker or a drop ball or splitter, something that moves away from the fastball plane, and I swing at the ball, I miss the changeup, I miss the slider, right? So it's actually Craig Wallenbrock's information that I learned this from. Is we talk about, we'll get into some depth stuff. This is fun. But we get into some depth stuff. Barrel depth is when the barrel gets in the zone, right? And that's an exaggeration, but it's when we're talking about hitting a fastball. Let's say I get into kind of what we would call that connection position, and I'm seeing a fastball, and I'm attacking it like it's a fastball. Well, if it maintains a fastball, I'm going to hit that thing, boom. But all of a sudden, that thing turns into a slider, and I'm attacking it like it's a fastball. If I have that ability to carry my depth onto that new plane of that pitch, now I can literally attack it like it's a heater and adjust to a slider mid-swing just with my natural bat path. But somebody that's taught short to long through, hey, I want you to be as short as you can, you know, kind of barrel to ball here. I'm going to go short to ball. Well, if I'm swinging at that thing like it's a fastball and it turns into a slider, I got no chance. Slider's gone. And as pitching gets better, it's really, really vital in professional baseball. As pitching gets better, we don't see the ball as well. So you're going to swing at sliders when you think they're a fastball, and then can I carry through and still catch a slider? Or am I just going to be the guy that whiffs sliders my entire career and probably doesn't make it as far as I possibly could? So I think this is just, we saw this a minute ago, but it's a really good video for on plane through plane. This is just fastball machine here, and you see the plane of that pitch coming in very straight, and you see the barrel gets on plane deep, right? It's not a long swing, very short swing, very compact here, but that barrel kind of drops in behind that ball very, very deep here. So like even at this point here, barrel's like off his back knee, off his back hip. If he made contact right now, it's a foul ball for sure, but you can see that he's behind the ball. So if he was this late, he would still have the ability to foul that ball off. You know, if he hits the ball here, maybe 1 or 2 frames out in front, about right in here, maybe like right there, that's probably right down the right field line. It's just a guess, but it's probably right down the right field line. You know, now we're working into like right center here, and then all of a sudden we're like dead center here, left center here. But you can see now he's gotten to the ball. And this is where a lot of bad swings, you can really see it, because you're not going to see what this looks like here, is now watch the bat kind of trace the ball out after contact. So now on the next frame, watch how the barrel stays behind the ball. Barrel's behind the ball. Barrel's behind the ball. Barrel's behind the ball. So now he can hit a fastball way back here if he needs to, shoot a 4-hole, shoot a right field line, and he can hit a breaking ball way out here and go pull side down left field line. And it's just that ability to be on plane deep, through plane long, is just maximizing his room for error. It's maximizing his ability to hit a ball hard when he's not perfect. You know, like in Major League Baseball nowadays, with the mark, it used to be like 20 homers used to be the mark, and now it's obviously probably 30, like the new 20s, 30, whatever. But it's like you can be perfect, and granted, some of those guys hit home runs when they're not perfect either. Like, I'm not going to sit here and argue that, but like realistically, those guys are perfect like 30 times out of a year. And in Major League Baseball, their year is 600 ABs. think that's a good argument to the strikeouts, nowadays. And we'll get into 2 strikes and striking out too much and that kind of stuff as we go. But they have 600 at bats. You know how many years it takes kids in high school to get 600 at bats? Like if you look at your top guys that are in the top 3 in the lineup every game, those guys are probably in a good season, probably 200 ABs, like with high school probably, maybe 300 if they're like really playing all the time. And you got good solid schedules. Like that's a half of a major league season if you're at 300. And I would argue that getting to 300 at bats in high school ball or even youth baseball is not easy to do. So by all means, I think that this is on plane through plane. You're going to hear me talk about north to south. Like I want my barrel to be north to south, not east to west. East to west to me is, and this is lingo. Lingo, we always talk about words. We always kind of throw it out there. I don't know why it's funny, but we always say words. It's just words, right? But it's just the lingo that people use, because generally speaking, when you heard the word that someone has a flat swing, right? This guy's got a flat swing. Like you would probably constitute that with a good thing, right? Well, when I think of a flat swing, I actually use that verbiage as a bad thing because the swing is working in a circular motion. I'm only on plane here, and I can't stay through plane out front. And all of our damage is done hitting a ball in relationship to out front. I mean, it's front foot, 2 inches inside the front foot on a ball away, and things that are out in front on balls that are more middle in. Those are like the quote unquote kind of joy zone or launch zone where you're going to do your most damage. Even Barry Bonds, guys that talked about catching everything deep, catch everything, just caught everything super deep. If you go look at all of his home runs, he didn't catch anything off his back hip. There's just, that ball goes foul. But we're trying to be able to time north to south to hit the ball out in front. But if I'm doing it efficiently, I don't have to hit it out front. I can hit it deep. I can hit it really far out in front if I have to. So it just maximizes. So east to west versus north to south, you start getting into that kind of that flat swing where everything's kind of across the zone at some point, a very level type path. Granted, on the higher pitches, it's going to level out by nature. It's going to have a little bit more of that look to it. So that kind of leads us into getting on plane in relationship to the height of the pitch. Is the height of the pitch is going to kind of dictate the plane of your path. And I think that's why some of the TrackMan Rapsodo stuff can be really overdone, and it can hurt hitters on certain pitches. You're like, I need you to work on getting this attack angle with blast motion to get this launch angle to happen more often. Well, next thing I know, they've overcorrected something, and now they can't touch the top of the zone, right? So to me, it should be natural. It should happen by having good moving pieces that lead to that with very individualized, natural athletic movements. So the higher the pitch, definitely the more level my attack angle. So do you guys know the difference between attack angle and launch angle? It's kind of important, because if you look at I blast motion sensors, I don't know if you guys have any or use them or have any experience with them. We have a running joke with blast motion, and it's crazy because blast motion is used in a lot of major league organizations, especially in minor league baseball, and we laugh. It's literally the biggest piece of shit. Excuse my language. They're now like $100 million company or whatever. It's ridiculous how much people have bought into these things, and it is so off. It's crazy. Their whole piece is knowing where your spine is. It's like their whole technology is built off of knowing where the spine is in relationship to when you're swinging. And you cannot tell me that this piece knows where my spine is. It's impossible. And it's very easily argued against. And oftentimes, there's actually one of the guys that I've helped through the years. He coaches it. If you ever have a guy that needs to go here, let me know. But I'm going to screw this up. What was it? College of Saint Scholastica. Oh, that one's tough, man. That's really hard. It's a D3 out in Minnesota. And he's out there. And they ran blast motion because his head coach wanted everyone to do it. Well, they ran blast motion through the fall, the winter, and the spring, in all of their batting practice, all of their scrimmages, just not in the actual season. And then they did it again the next year just to see if anything changed. So they did it for 2 years, and he said that both years were identical with different players too, but in some similar players. But basically, the best blast scores they got, the very best guys on the team with the best blast scores finished in the bottom 3 of every hitting category, and the worst blast scores were the top 3 guys. Both years. And that's not the first time I've heard about that. And then so I have a Blast, I have a Diamond Kinetics, and I have a Zep from when that first came out, which is really old. And they're all 3 the sensors, and we put them on the bats and literally are like taking the worst possible swing possible, just, like helicopter swinging, like spinning off to the left like you're not even playing baseball anymore. And Blast connection score was like 93% or 93 percentile. And then we take like a really good swing and it's like 45 percentile. And you're like, this is stupid. So don't jump into that too much. But height of pitch, and see me getting off on different tangents. But height of pitch it's definitely going to match the shoulders. We talk about matching angles. It's really has to do with posture, though. I think posture kind of is a more important piece that goes with it, and we can kind of get more into that. But basically, if you look at contact, and like relative to contact point and then the shoulders, as you're going to see the shoulder angle kind of matches the barrel angle typically when we're on plane. Now you can do that and miss below this pitch, you can, but typically in relationship to the pitch, the shoulder angle and the barrel angle are going to match, and that's called matching angles. It's really just a byproduct more than a teach. But let's say you're filming guys in here hitting from rear view because you guys got some good nets for it, and you're filming a rear view round, and you'll see the guys where they kind of have maybe the barrel head's up too much and it's not matching the shoulders, or the guys that are losing the bat head too much and the shoulders are tall but the bat head's way down. And you're like, okay, like obviously we're not seeing a clean path happen in relationship to the body. So if you would see him efficient on a higher pitch here, and I'll get some film of it later on, the shoulders would definitely be a little bit more level, and that bat plane would constitute and kind of match that. So it's kind of like one and the same, but it's just not a teach. But if you just watch me from rear view as I'm kind of working through, as you see as I'm hitting an up pitch, the barrel and the shoulders are relatively the same angle, and as I go to that down pitch, you see that little lean on it, and now the barrel angle and the shoulder angle relatively close. Not a perfect science and much more of a byproduct than an actual teach, but I think it is something that we can look at and go, you can kind of see that your barrel angle is kind of off in comparison to your shoulder angle, so there's definitely some kind of fight there to get your path off. It's going to have a little bit of that grind, right? I like that grind word a little bit too much, but really good. On plane, through plane. This guy's at Hawaii. You can just kind of see everyone does it maybe a little bit different, a little bit flatter bat angle here, but you still kind of see that carry from behind and then through, just giving him more room to be able to drive a baseball, even when he's a little bit off. So I think this is Clow again. You ever play against Rock Creek when Clow was on that team? They told me he'd closed for USC last year, and I was like, he walked in the cage. I did not expect him to look a little bit differently. I don't know why, but he was just like a little skinny little infielder, but he's like 93 off the bump. But you kind of see that plane here a little bit, barrel angle, shoulder angle, nice match right there. Delivers that barrel well. It's good. Any questions on that at all? Anybody got anything? Makes sense?
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Let's see if we see something here.
For us to use the next time we use video.
Yeah. Video to me is the best technology. I think there's a lot of people that would argue that there's so much other technology out there now, but video to me doesn't lie. I mean, it can in certain ways, but I think that as a whole, video is one of our best tools to use, and I'm going to show you guys a bunch of different ways that we can use video to help hitters here. So I think there's a good example here of like how he's matching his shoulder angle here, but when you watch him kind of flip the bat head up, out, like off plane right there.
That's where he rolls over.
Exactly. It's honestly, he didn't stay through plane very well. a little flippy. Sometimes it's in guys' grips. Sometimes you're holding that grip. There's actually a story on Miguel Cabrera to where, like, if the bat's in the bat rack in the dugout, he'll never touch the bat with these two fingers. Like, I don't know if it's out of just, like his superstition or what, but he really never has those two fingers on the bat. And it makes sense from a standpoint of muscles and by being able to support palm up, because when I grab the bat with these two fingers here, watch what the bat head does. It wants to come up. So like that right there is like probably right there with Clow. It's probably right there. He's right behind that thing, barrel, hands above barrel, barrel on plane, and then he pinches right there, and that bat head just lifts just enough to come over the top of that a little bit. Boom, right there. So a lot of times we actually have hitters really loose with the top two fingers, and it usually feels very comfortable for a lot of hitters. It's not for everyone. I'm not going to make everyone do something like that. But it typically helps with the guy that's really fighting and coming up there. We roll over, you hear it. It's almost like it's like rolling up and over, Same thing, but it's just weird how like when I was growing up, we always thought rolling over was like rolling down. And in hindsight, most rollovers happen on the way up. It's unique, but that's good stuff. I like it. So I definitely wanted to pop over in the cage. About 5:22 here. We got 35, 45 minutes left. So we can pop over there and just kind of go through some simple things, and just kind of get up, move around a little bit, which is always nice. But we'll definitely finish back over here. But he wanted me to turn the camera a little bit so we can maneuver that. My nose is ridiculously itchy. I'm like staring into the camera. It's good. Probably, I don't know, probably that one. Just like maybe, I don't know. I'm not a camera guy. Lighting and, I don't know, easier to see maybe, I don't know. Oh, you can see.
Yeah.
There you go. Nice.
The red square.
That looks pretty good. I guess we could probably move this a little more. This setup is legit. How's that look? That's pretty good, right? That's probably fine. Yeah, probably, because I'm going to be demonstrating from probably a little closer. How does that look? That's solid. You can always move it, too. I need my board and my ball. Breakfast of champions right there. Oh, yeah, it's dinner time. Dogs play tonight, don't they? Is it right now? Yeah, I don't know how many people are excited to watch that after last week, but neither at the moment. We'll kind of maybe get into that a little bit, but I think one thing that I want to do, though, I was telling, I think Darren, when we were getting started in this stuff, is definitely want to bring in maybe, McKinley or somebody, bring him in and use him as an example kind of guy. We can swing too, which I do like to do, is have coaches kind of feel things out, right? There's nothing worse than a demonstrator that demonstrates improperly, right? That one really kills me. I get videos from hitting coaches all the time where they're demonstrating. I'm like, what you're saying is right, but how you're moving, not so good, which is tough. But yeah, I like these screens. I've always been a fan of the little cutout for flipping. That's good. That's good. Now, when you guys are flipping, when you guys are doing your flips, are you standing or sitting? Standing. Okay. Do you guys do that as everyone, or is that like a mandatory thing, or is that more of just kind of how more individual?
Side toss, front toss?
Yeah, flips. Just underhand. Yeah, front toss. Yeah.
Oh, front toss.
So like when they're here. I don't do any side toss really, so I don't really know. I haven't heard that word in a while, but then when we're here, it just flips forward, straight on. So I don't care if you're sitting down or you're standing up. I like standing up just because I have more control of it and I can keep the ball straighter. There's nothing worse than a guy sitting on a bucket flipping the ball up. is you're making the ball create a plane that is very realistic to maybe like a really slow curveball. So we're trying to really just feed the ball straight and present that pitch with some decent speed on it. I think flips that are dying when they get to the plate, that plane is changing, right? Now their path is going to try and create a solution to that. Now, if you're facing a nasty sinker baller that day, great, drop that ball you want. But generically, you just want to see that thing fly straight as it's crossing the plane or the hitting zone, whatever you want to call it, as best you can. Footwork for me is just right, left, flip. It's kind of off. I do that differently than a lot of people, I think, which I don't care as long as it works, but just present right, left, flip, and keeping it straight. These screens, I don't know how the ricochets are on these, but definitely don't want to be too close. If you're setting up too close, those ricochets get pretty nasty. I think it was Carlos Beltran shattered his eye socket on a comebacker from a screen. So my screen's pretty deep when I'm doing. I would say it's probably somewhere in the realm of about 15 to 16 feet, and it just makes the flips a little bit tougher, but we should still be able to maintain that pretty good there. I think that like how you flip or how you feed a machine, and we'll get more into that as we go, but how you feed those machines is so vital that everyone does it in a consistent manner. I went to watch the Reds spring training. I got to go out and shadow someone about 4 years ago, and I'm watching 4 fields. They had like rookie ball, single A, double A, triple A in their minor league system, and I'm watching 4 fields with 4 different machines set up on each field. So each field had one machine, and they were doing high velo fastball, and it was hilarious because on field 1, the machine was about 40 feet away. Field 2, the machine was about 47 feet away, 46 feet away. Field 3 had it at 50 feet, and then field 4 had it at like 48 feet. And you're just like, what are we doing here? Like, why are you guys at the highest level? Why are you guys not all doing the exact same thing? And then I get to watch even worse, how every feeder's doing something different, and it gives the hitter 0 timing. This is probably the worst one for me, is when you just see the guy that just holds it out, and then now you're trying to time a high velocity machine most of the time off of just that. That is so unrealistic to hitting. That's why a lot of hitters hate machines. The auto feeders for the big hack attack is good. The auto feeders are good. They're not necessary if you feed well. So what we do is we're going to tap. I'm going to tap here, and that's kind of going to emulate like a pitcher coming set. Then I'm going to show, and then I'm going to go. But there's a consistent timing of it. It's kind of, okay, here we are, show, go. So it's 1, 2, 3. And we want to stay on that relative to, because that gives us ample amount of time and some consistency off the machines a little bit. We'll talk more about machine use and using them a little bit later, but I definitely wanted to talk about a couple drills today. But before we talk about drills, I do want to go over tee work. Do you have a tee around here? I like that I don't see 500 of them. So first and foremost, what pitch is every pitcher trying to throw for the most part? Like, where is every pitcher trying to throw? Think more up and down. Like, everyone's trying to throw the ball down, right? You live at the knees, live at the knees, live at the knees. Well, the problem with these tees is they don't even get to the damn knees, right? So we have tees that are literally working mid-thigh and up, but every pitcher is trying to work everything lower than this. So I actually do buy the youth Tanner tees more than I buy the bigger ones. We have the bigger ones, but I like the youth ones because they're actually about a couple balls below my knees. They don't go up as high. But if you want to add a high one to the youth Tanner tee, then put the tee on a bucket, and now you have a high tee. So I actually prefer the youth Tanner tee because they're built the exact same, just shorter. So it actually gives you more things you can do with it. We also use cone tees as well. I'll send you the link to a lot of this stuff. I already have a bunch of it on just a little note thing on my phone. I'm just going to send it over to you on a couple things to pick up, to add. But the youth Tanner tees I like a lot for that reason. Is just these just don't go low enough. I think when we're talking about this, it's pretty important to maybe be in a position where you can kind of have some perception of like the zone. But generically speaking, hitters on tees, the reason I don't like it is, I guess the simple thing is that the ball's moving in the game and it's not here on a tee, right? It's like I'm not going to teach you to golf by rolling a golf ball in at you. It's the wrong sport. So, like ultimately though, I think you would see, we used to have the cutouts at our cage. I hated them so much, but they're like the little pads where it shows you where to put the tee in relationship to hitting the ball to right center, which has nothing to do with like the size of the person, where they set up in the box. It's just ludicrous. But generically speaking, if you have a hitter that's going to work oppo, where do we typically put this tee? You know, somewhere close to the outside corner, somewhere deeper, right? So we typically are going to see kind of that diagonal line. So you're going to see the deep tee here for oppo, and you're going to see the further out in front tee here for pull side. And the biggest thing that I have against that is it's not bad to hit some balls in those positions, but in a game, we're extremely more likely to hit the away pitch further out in front than the inside pitch, right? So if I'm more likely to hit the away pitch out here, and I've now spent all of my time working on hitting it here, I'm not going to have a solution to hitting this pitch out in front. I'm not going to have comfort hitting it out in front, right? So for me, if we're going to use tees and we have to use them to get maximum amount of work in here, we got to make sure that hitters know how to use tees properly. So what I recommend is, because it can't be too confusing, it needs to be simple, is I like to work 3 depths, basically a late depth, an on-time depth, and then an early depth. So you might start on time or relative to, and then maybe a couple when they're a little bit late, and then all of a sudden when they're early. If I had to choose one of those 3, it would be early. It would be work on hitting the away pitch out in front when you're early on it, because you are much, much more likely to do that in a game, and I want comfort there. They used to call it the Mark McGuire drill. I don't remember if it was literally, because I'm assuming it was, but he would always put that tee away and out front, because he was talking about how he was constantly hitting breaking balls out in front, and when he was younger he was always capping them or missing them, and he had to teach himself to be able to stay on that ball as long as possible to still be able to catch it and hit it well. So definitely recommend doing more away out front, and vice versa, I would recommend doing more in when it's actually beat us a little bit. I land here, that ball's off my front foot and in, and right there, if I have a good bat plane, I should be able to hit that up the middle and still take my base hit up the middle, right? But what we end up seeing is there's no comfort there because they don't work on it. So what do? Is they throw the bat head at it and they roll it over. They panic swing, right? So utilizing tees extremely, extremely important. You also see all of our tee tops that get destroyed over time, right? So there's an old story that Reggie Jackson would tell. I don't know if Reggie Jackson told it, but it was the Yankees minor leaguer that told it to me. But Reggie Jackson would show up to Yankees minor league camp, and he would be there for a couple days, I guess, and he would walk around to early work, and a lot of early work is tee and flips, and he would watch a guy hit off a tee, and they'd hit off a tee, and the only words he ever said was wrong. And then he'd walk over here, and they'd be like, what the fuck? Excuse my language. Be like, what the heck? He'd walk over here, and he'd watch wrong. And these guys are like, what? Like, told every one of the guys that they're hitting off a tee wrong. And then finally, at the end of like his little 3 or 4 day stint on being there, he would end up like explaining to everyone why they were wrong. And it was because they were all smashing the tee and not actually hitting behind and through. So if you put the ball on the tee here, if you're talking about a fastball, now the plane of the fastball is presented a little bit awkwardly on tees, because it's kind of like this plane is coming out of like the pitcher's like belly button, right? It's the plane of this is kind of presented in a little bit of an awkward kind of position. But it's not enough to really have to worry too much about it. But in hindsight, really like a simple way to hit off tees well is to imagine about a 10-inch nail behind the ball. About a 10-inch nail behind that ball, and I really want to work to get my barrel behind that nail and then through that ball. And when I do that, there will be minimal friction on this tee. It's still going to move as the ball comes off the tee. This will always move unless I'm really hitting the ball straight up, and you still see it move a little bit, right? So there is going to be a little bit of friction, but you're not going to see like the kids that end up knocking your tee over. You know, you got a freaking 10-pound weight on it, and you still see kids coming either chopping down too much and slamming this thing over, or swinging up too much and still doing the same thing. So we're really trying to hit as much ball as we possibly can with as less amount of that tee as possible. So it's really of trying to get behind and through and square that thing up strong without touching the tee as much as I possibly can. And that's really an efficient way to hit off tees in terms of on plane, through plane. I do like like 5 high, 5 low, 3 middle. You know, if you're going to move a tee up and down. So we talked about, what's my math on this? 9 times 3 is 27, right? I went to public school, Jackson High School. So there's going to be some math issues there. But basically, if you were going to go like a full tee routine, it'd be 3 deep, 3 middle, 3 out front, and then every height, right? So you're basically like you're going to go 3, not in terms of the number, but you have like basically early, on time, and late on away, early, on time, late on middle, and then early, on time, late on in. So if you do that at all 3 heights, now you got the top of the zone, do all 9 of those from the top, then the middle, and then the bottom. You basically have like 27 different locations that you can move this tee. And in hindsight, most people that use tees only move them in 3 locations. Maybe they do up and down, so you might, go up a little bit on that. But really, there's a lot of places that we can cover with a tee. But I think most importantly is accomplishing the ones that we're more likely to do in the game. Another thing that really drives me up a wall is I might move the tee out here, but what is, little Johnny gets in the cage, and it's like, okay, I'm setting the tee up out there. Well, what do is they just stride out here, and now it's like hitting a normal pitch. So I think it's important that they understand where they're starting in relationship to the plate and where the tee is put. Because if I'm setting up here normally, and then my stride length is, relatively 6, 8, 10 inches, now this ball's out in front of my front foot. Now I'm actually early on an away pitch, whereas, little Johnny just gets in here and slides up in the box and makes that now feel very comfortable. So he's really not even doing the tee work properly at that point. Does that make sense? Tees, we use them, got to use them right though. Really got to use them right. I believe in that like there's no tomorrow.
You're really just trying to keep these kids hitting on plane, through plane, obviously, in different positions.
Exactly. Yeah, timing windows or contact points, in relationship to, is really because there's no timing involved here. I have a fixed location. I know where this ball is going to be when I'm making contact with it. So that kind of brings us into the even potentially more important than what we just talked about off tees is how to set up to hit off of them. So I'm just going to face you guys really quick in the camera. But what do we typically see with a hitter's eyes when they're hitting off tees? You've seen me do it when I'm standing in here, but I stare at the ball, right? And I'm staring here, and in a game, the ball's coming from a pitcher out there. So, and we also start to see now they even start to angle their body towards the ball. So now if you're talking about balance, I'm already out of balance, right? Front shoulder, front hip, I'm already turned in, I'm already out of balance. So they sit in here and they're like turned in, eyes down, and they stay right there, and then they hit, opposed to picking up a pitcher. Now I want to find my pitcher, use my imagination. I can be creative with my mind. So when I'm on tees, it's not going to be the last time. But when I'm on tees, here I am with my eyes, Now I'm finding a pitcher, and I can even visualize. We all know what a pitcher looks like when he's moving. I can picture that in my brain right now. Someone going through a windup and delivering a pitch. I can even picture somebody doing quick pitches and from a slide step. And here I am. But wind up, leg kick, hand brake, ball comes in and I hit. I'm going to get so much more out of that rep because that's how my eyes are going to track in the game anyways. And it's also now promoting my swing, being more in balance. Here it is, and then pow, opposed to just turning in and sitting here, getting nothing out of it. So that's a tough one because it's tough to like see where their eyes are. That's where I think it's more of like you can explain that to the whole team of like, guys, we want to make sure that when we're using tees, we're picking up a pitcher. We know if he's righty or lefty, just getting them to think creatively. And then, where to set up, how to make that move a little bit. In relationship, everything's different based on length of arms, length of legs. But I think generically speaking, when I land and the ball's off of my front foot, relatively close to right on time, maybe even a tick late for some. If I'm landing and the tee's, 4, 5, 6 inches in front of my front foot, relatively a little bit more early. And then obviously if I'm landing and the ball's well inside of my front foot, a little bit late there, just as a reference to a certain degree. But got to use tees, just got to make sure we get better using them because it's really easy to get worse using a tee. So any questions on that? Makes sense. It's good when there's not a ton of questions because it means it makes sense, right? It's good. I'm going to leave this here for you guys. That way you don't have to go worry about buying one. It's 2x6. I think the 2x4 is probably a little safer in the realm of we actually stride over this board. And when it's a little bit more skinny, the 2x4, a little bit less likely that you're going to step on this and roll your ankle. I've actually never seen it happen, and I've used this drill a ton. But as I say that, it's probably going to happen tomorrow. So we use it for balance. It's going to promote a hitter to make a balanced move. It's one of the simplest drills that we can do. I highly recommend getting used to the move without timing. Maybe off the tee you're doing this, and dry swings you're doing this. But it's such a simple tool, and we can actually use this board in a few different ways, but this is the main way we use it. And we just call it step over drill. I have a video on the Google Drive that will be there for you guys to remind you of this drill, but it's definitely a drill that I would just start implementing with a lot of hitters, especially hitters that like to sit and reach, because they're not going to be able to get over the board. Hitters that start out way too wide and really can't create a balanced move because they're too wide. Ooh, that was close. I almost just pulled my groin. But good thing I'm a little flexible down there. But now it's like immediately you narrow up a little bit, you get to an athletic setup, and now I can make an athletic move over the board without having any worry of stepping on the board. Just don't go right into flippies on them with it without giving them context or a goal to make sure that, hey, number one thing is to get over the board, not hit this ball. Because if they care more about hitting the ball, next thing you know, they land on the board, that's when you might hurt an ankle. I have not seen it, but it's definitely possible. So very cautious on that. But step over drill is a very, very, very good drill to maintain balance and make a positive move for timing and to just clean up that overall move of balance within the swing a little bit. But that was really close to pulling the groin. So don't do that. But connection ball, I'll leave this here as well. This one's pretty beat up. But connection ball, I don't know if you guys have seen these ever. I got the link, Darren, I'll send it to you. That way we can get a few more of these ordered. Connection balls are really good. It's funny because on the picture of the connection ball, it's Justin Verlander using it for throwing drill, which I'm not a pitching coach, but he was like in a throwing position or something. I don't know, maybe you pitching guys can tell me if that's valuable or not, but we use it for hitting. It's back arm. It's a really simple drill. I just had him in my car, so I figured I'd bring him in and show you guys, but we'll basically have him hold it in there. It's kind of a nice, kind of flimsy. I've seen people do this drill with other balls. This is the best ball for it because you can deflate and inflate really quickly. So someone with really skinny long arms, you might want more air in it. Maybe someone with stockier, shorter arms like myself, maybe a little bit less air in it. And really we're just talking about the connection between top hand and back shoulder. And that's going to be our drop in. So when we're talking about top hand dropping in, that kind of connection move, that connection, you see that integrity of like the distance from hand to shoulder here. And where most hitters, especially a lot of handsy, kind of pushy, younger hitters that are trying to be accurate, they tend to disconnect that angle. So if you kind of watch me at launch position here, that hand is in relationship to that shoulder. Some people used to call it power triangle. I think hand, shoulder, elbow. And from there, if I'm disconnecting that angle, I'm either dropping my hands or I'm casting out. We're losing that integrity of our drop-in. So this is a phenomenal drill for a very simple feel of being able to hold the ball as I'm dropping in and maintain that distance, maintain that power triangle as we're dropping in and holding what we call lag or holding angles as I'm coming through. And then as I would swing, so if I was doing a one-handed only drill, I would have the hitter kind of feel it dropping in tight so we can hold the ball in. Then maybe I flip, or maybe we do a T rep to get used to the feeling. And as I go, the ball shouldn't come out until I'm coming through palm up, and it should filter out pretty naturally. Try it right-handed, but it should filter out pretty naturally into like second base, 4-hole-ish. Kind of depends. Two-handed swings, it'll go a little bit further. Worst part of the drill is that you have to go pick the ball up and do it again. That's why we have about 10 of these at the cage. I think they're $9.99. My only thing is when you do get the new ones, when you're blowing them up the first time, because when they come, they're really kind of sticky. They actually look more green than this, but they're really easy to tear. I've torn so many of them the first time I'm pulling them out of the package, and you're trying to pull it out a little bit, and then you blow it up, and as you put this piece in, the little piece that stops the air from coming out, you can easily rip them. So then you just wasted $10. So, but connection ball, really, really good. So we'll do it with top hand only for some, and then we'll also do it with two hands for others. We're just trying to feel that connection as I'm dropping in. And you can really see if you look at my front side here, as I'm dropping in, my front side is not moving. My chest and my shoulders are not moving out. Everything stays in and holds that, and it's not getting into the front of my body. That's definitely working independent from my shoulders. And then from here, now I'm in that position, I should be able to whip that thing out, and that ball will pop out pretty easily. I'm not going to show you that right-handed though, because that right-handed swing is not no good. But does that make sense? Pretty simple. I'll leave this here just because I had an extra one in my car. But connection ball drill is really a solid drill. Really simple, but it really promotes that good connection, that short to, long through. And it really forces, especially you start getting into up and down pitches, it can really force hitters to have to utilize their body more than their hands on tougher pitches. Like balls that are down, we oftentimes just see the hands drop to hit the down pitch. And if I wanted you to do that, I'd give you a golf club, right? Because a golf club is a lot longer, it would help you. And most guys that do that end up topping everything down anyways, opposed to if I had to hold that in here on the down pitch, that's going to force my body to have to actually make an adjustment and ride through that down pitch, you know, with my legs or with my side bend a little bit. So I think we'll start getting into a little bit more mobility stuff next week, where we can kind of add to, you know, the side bend versus, you know, getting into the legs, because everyone's a little bit different on their kind of mobility of their spines that will play a role with who you are on some of your adjustment swings. But really important there. So feeding consistency, feeding machines consistently, just really vital for that timing mechanism and trying to create a more game-like timing in and off a machine. I grew up, I was the kid that was stubborn as all stubborn off machines. I hate machines, it ruins my timing. Well, if we had better feeders that were more consistent on their feed, now I have some timing that I can go off of, and you find some more consistency on that, which is great. And then obviously with the flips, make sure they're coming in nice and straight. Do coaches flip or do the players flip? Kind of both. How do the players flip? Decent?
Some do.
Every year, like some teams I have, because I make my 18s flip as well. Numbers are higher, and I think it's good for them to learn because they're going to do it in college. But it's really frustrating at first because half of them are so bad at it. So just as a reminder, I think a lot of them, they tend to kind of like use the wrist, and that's where it's kind of like they're flipping, and that's when everything's rising. It's not a lot of consistency. So I usually go 3 fingers, lock out the wrist kind of backwards, and then I just kind of give it a push, and that it tends to come out pretty consistently straight, and at least more accurate. Actually, this is really important if you are having players feed. Cole Miller, the one I just showed you, he shattered his hand in 4 places this off season. So it was actually really close to the beginning of their season. He was doing really well, and then he goes in the cage. They're getting ready to play a scrimmage, I believe, and he just flips, and for one reason or another, he just didn't get his hand out of the way, and just 95 off the hand. Everything blew up in the hand. He was out for like 2 months. So when we're flipping, these screens are great for it. But even on these screens, I think that we tend to see feeders get too close to the screen where now my hand is trapped. Like I'll feed it here, and then they try and pull it out. And you can even see me, I would still get hit here anyways. But I like to give some room between the flip and the screen, so when I follow through, my follow through immediately clears the screen, so that no matter what, I'm not going to ever get my hand hit. It's really, really, really important for those, especially the players, obviously coaches too, but just making sure. I've never seen it in our cage, but obviously it does happen because Cole Miller did it. So, but definitely got to be very cautious on that. I usually tend to spend my first practice teaching flipping, not the whole practice. That would be brutal, but there's a nice 10-minute segment of flipping. All flippers are wearing helmets. Like that's up to you guys on how you guys run that, but I don't know. You got to treat some of these 17, 18-year-old kids like they're not the smartest. And Cole Miller's a great kid. He's a smart kid, but you can see it still happens occasionally. Just don't want to see it. Don't want to see it. Not fun. But is there any questions on some of the simple stuff? I want to show a couple more drills really quick, and then we can go sit back down and chat for a few more minutes. But the 50-50 drill, there's some mobility stuff that gets applied to it. But I think most people have seen this drill. We run it a lot. Is load stride pause would be kind of another terminology for the drill. It's really kind of like getting into your hitting position and then firing from there. I see a ton of hitters do this drill really poorly on the front foot, kind of how they're landing with it, because they don't realize that when they swing normally without thinking that their front foot actually lands maybe slightly open, opposed to when they're doing like a take or this drill, they're landing really closed off with the foot. And if you're teaching hitters to land in the same position with their front foot, you're probably making about 60% of them worse, if not more, because most people are pretty tight in their hips. There's not a lot of people that are super hypermobile in the hips. And if I'm having somebody land super closed, that front hip is kind of jammed up already, and I'm fighting to get through with my backside. So immediately when you get a little bit more like neutral landing position, doesn't have to be wide open, but now it kind of frees up that hip and everything can kind of function much stronger. So when we're doing 50-50 drill, it's basically I'm going to wait for the hitter to get to their launch position, and then we're going to hit from there. You see a couple things stand out. It's definitely searching for rhythm, searching for power. Once we're there, it's literally like we're kind of solid rock, and then we just fire. So we don't want to see another inward move. We don't want to see a reload of the hands. We don't want to see someone re-pick up their heel. It's really trying to hit from a very stagnant position and go from there. It's tougher for some than it is for others, but really a great drill to kind of get comfort with being on the ground, being in my hitting position, firing from that position. And then from a coach's standpoint, we can see some things. We can see posture. You know, are they losing posture? Am I getting too deep here and setting myself up to hit a pitch off the ground? Or is my lead arm getting out of line? Now my lead arm gets out of line here. You can kind of see it already wants to work into that pull side gap instead of that north to south. right? So there's some really quality things. You can see vision, you can see the eyes when they're in that position, or the eyes look strong and they can see from there, or are they kind of already hiding here and it's tougher to see. We call them pirate hitters, hitters that end up coiling themselves to where if I gave you an eye patch, you wouldn't be able to see the ball. We see that a lot of guys trying to coil to create power. Drills I don't like, and this is relative to each individual. If you do it, you have success, you like it, and then all of a sudden your regular swing, it looks great and it works, great, do the drill, I don't care. But we used to do a lot of open stance, like a lot of it. I personally don't like it. I know there's a lot of coaches that do, but I think I can accomplish the exact same thing from just not striding here, because that's how I would normally function anyways. And I think most of the time when I see the open stance, the first thing we see is a giant shoulder move in, and now the next move wants to go out, right? And I think at that point, why would we not just work that same thing, what we call heels down drill or feet in the ground, where I'm just kind of widened out, I'm relaxed, I'm comfortable, and I'm just working my swings from there and just trying to work the path, you know, on and through north to south and hit line drives the bigger part of the field as consistently as I can. It's also teaching hitters that the swing starts with the feet flat on the ground. It doesn't start with the back heel coming up. I think that's a good thing to show. So really quickly, if you kind of get to a hitting position, everyone, if you can do it right now, go ahead and try it. Just get to a hitting position, kind of like you've already landed, and then pop up your back heel. Pop it up, and then try and flex your back butt cheek. It's like impossible. Put your heel down, now you can flex it. So once you've lost the connection of your back heel in the ground, you've lost your power. So you see a lot of these coaches nowadays, that some of it's old school, some of it might be new school or whatever, but you see a lot of this stuff where they're teaching hitters to pop the heel up as they're landing. I even see some drills where they want you in that position. I think I saw one guy call it halfway home or something, where you're like already in that position, and it's literally a giant waste of time, because the heel being down is our butt, is our power. So you're literally teaching a hitter to not use the ground and not use the butt, which is where the power comes from. If you don't have your glute, you don't have your butt, you don't have your power anymore. So really a good drill is learning how to keep the heel down and just doing the heels down drill. And for hitters that really struggle with it, we do take the board here. I also have a Callaway golf wedge, a little mini golfing wedge. Those are like $10. I'll send you a link for that as well. It's on there. But we put the toe up. So we'll actually put the toe up so the heel's in the ground, and we'll have the hitter take some swings like that just to feel the heel staying in the ground. And you'll see the ones that really struggle with it, they'll still pop it up off of this. It's very uncomfortable for me after years of not popping my heel up. But the heel comes up, but it's kind of begs the question of, why does the back heel come up? And for some, it's going to come up a little earlier, and for others maybe a little bit later. Some of that's mobility. They could potentially be in the wrong position. That's where you would test mobility, but it's also timing based, right? Like 95 in, I'm probably getting my hips, my core, my butt going earlier than a breaking ball at 75, right? So you'll see the heels actually stay down longer on the breaking ball, and then all of a sudden 95 in, the heel comes up earlier. It's just a byproduct of time, and obviously individually based per each hitter in how they're set up and how they're moving in relationship to time. But definitely keeping the heels down. It's something that I did not understand at first, but it's really a huge piece to the kinetic chain and the transfer of energy through the core into the ground and then back up into your body and up the chain and eventually into your bat. So heels down drill, simple. It's really kind of uncomfortable for a lot of hitters. And I don't really mind if the heel kind of comes up a little bit towards the end of the swing, like towards your finish, the heel kind of pops up a little bit. But there's such a difference between a heel that's releasing forward. And this is something that's really important. I'm going to have some voiceover videos. You saw it a little bit on the mobility video I showed you of the kid's ankle on the side-by-side. And there's a huge difference between a heel popping up, where it's actually leaving the ground straight up, and then maybe kicking back a little bit, which is kind of that squish the bug look to it, versus a heel that is releasing forward. It's releasing forward instead of up. And one of them is that I'm getting to the inside part of my foot before I release it, and the other one I'm just popping up from like the flat part of my feet. So like that Trout video we were looking at on TV where his back heel stays on the ground, so he was taking pitches where the heel stayed down but the foot went to eversion on the inside part of the foot there. Babe Ruth, you look at Babe Ruth, some takes that we have on the Adam Lynn Google Drive, but Babe Ruth used to take a pitch like this. He literally would drag that foot forward, but the heel would never leave the ground. Now, as he went to go swing and fire, then the heel would eventually release. He's not going to drag his back foot when he's hitting. It's just a byproduct of taking with quality movements. It gets a little bit mechanical, I guess. It gets a little bit cookie cutter-ish if you overdo some of the heel down stuff. So it's kind of like more of a byproduct of a good swing than a super overall, like, oh, you have to do it this way, because I want everything to be natural, right? So if it's not working naturally, we can feel it in some simple drills, but ultimately, like, there's probably something bigger that's standing out of why that it's not working. You know, I think that root cause is always going to be our goal as hitting coaches, is like maybe we see this that looks off, but maybe there's a different cause of why that's off, right? And if we can find root cause, that's the quickest way to fix it, and definitely the best way to fix it, because that's the outlying piece. You can spend all the time in the world on that individual piece, but if it's not the root cause, then it's still going to happen when you turn them back to loose or back to normal or whatever. So finding root cause, and I think that there's obviously, that's where knowing the body and knowing the timing or the context he's in. I see it all the time. I get hitters, you know, coaches, hitters will send me a video. It's like, what do you see here? And I still have one on my iPad. This kid hits a home run, and he hits a home run like this, where the flexed front knee, head's kind of forward, and hits a homer. And I remember sending it over to another hitting coach, like, what are your thoughts on this? Just to kind of try and almost trick him to see what he would say, because I think it kind of shows if you really truly get it or not. And he's, oh man, that flex front knee really breaking down. You know, I think he's going to really struggle. And it's a homer on a breaking ball, right? So context he did not care about. He just saw the swing. He just saw the mechanics. Well, if you watch that kid on a heater, it's got the firm front side. He's got that leverage foot, head, shoulder, hip, and knee generic on a good fastball swing. Like, it has that. But the context was that it was a slow breaking ball that the kid made an adjustment swing on and hit a homer, but all the guy saw was the mechanics instead of what the context was. And that's so important. That one's a huge one. So like even when I send video of my players to like colleges and it's on side view, I'm usually telling them what they're facing if they can't see it. You know, just 'cause I want them to know the context. Hey, this was slider machine. Because they might see some swings where the stride gets longer because he's buying time, or that he leaks onto the front foot a little bit because he's buying time. You know, that you see some adjustments where they might look at that and be like, oh, that's a bad swing. You're like, no, that's an adjustment. When he's on time to a heater, that's game hitting. That's what it's all about, right? So that context is everything. So that one kind of fires me up a little bit, because you get a lot of social media guys out there that are like trying to cookie cut swings and have no concept of what the context is, and that's the most important piece. What are you facing? You know, so any questions? Pretty good? I can just keep talking. It's pretty good at it. I love hitting. Hitting's fun. And hitting is the most complicated thing in all sports, in my opinion. We can make it more complicated or we can simplify things, but there's definitely pieces that will always be complicated and pieces that we can simplify. I think as hitting coaches, it's important to understand the complexity of things, and then it helps us be able to translate maybe something very complex into something more simple when I'm working with a 13-year-old or a kid that's already thinks way too much, right? We've got to kind of know who we're working with. I think that's extremely vital. So I'm going to pop back over to the camera. We can set this bad boy up. Darren, where would you like me to put this awesome connection ball in stride guide? Yeah,
Yeah.
the Nelson hitting bin. You might need a big bin though.
That's all right.
Very big bin.
That's awesome.
It's cool.
Thanks, Frank.
Oh, is that an old A-Tech in there?
You want it?
No, I don't. But thanks though. And you got the Jugs one too, man. Those are the old school ones right there. The Jugs one go thump, thump. That weird sound to it. But oh, maybe see if we can pop McKinley or someone in here next week and kind of show some drills a little bit in person. That'd be good. See what he's doing. One of those guys. Let's go to the bald-headed third baseman. Where is he?
Is that you impressed the University of Portland when he's down there?
Yeah,
Jake Melton's calling Bruce out. Who is this kid?
I love it. I love it. Man, I like the way he swings it. He really can swing. Good kid, too. Can he play third at the next level? That's the question.
Working on it.
Yeah,
Work on it.
that's the question. Feet don't have to be great. If the hands work a little bit and you got an arm, that'll be good.
Colleges don't recruit DHs, do
They don't. And if you're a first baseman, you better be really, really, really good at hitting, which he is. He is. But it's definitely tougher to get to where you want to go when you're getting recruited at first base because, you know, what was the old saying at Pat Murphy at Arizona State when I was growing up, which they were the powerhouse. Was it Pat Murphy? Is that his name? Pat Murphy? It was Pat Murphy. He would always recruit like 20 shortstops. And he'd just go, oh, you go to third, you go to second, you go to short, you go to first. You know, I was like, you take an athletic shortstop and put him at first, he's probably going to be a better first baseman than some other guys. But so this was like early on in our work, and you can really see with him what we were just talking about is he really does a great job of getting flat-footed. As both heels get on the ground at the same time, and you see what I was talking about with the release of the back heel. You can see that it's releasing forward. It's not popping up and spinning. And that release right there is very clean backside coming through. And you start to see the back foot actually come forward. And that to me is direction. That to me is power. Often times gets called a scissor kick. Is the backside kind of is driving through. It's very similar to throwing. If I threw and my back foot stayed down, I'm probably not going to have a lot of power. I'll probably look pretty odd, but that posterior chain is a really big word. I'll say it decently. It's just a big word for your backside. So like posterior chain is our backside, and he's driving his posterior chain through the ball. And you see that back leg, that release of that heel. Does everyone do it as good as that? No. And some guys' back foot don't go forward. Some guys don't scissor kick. I would say a huge majority nowadays do, but like I can show you old Votto, I can show you some Barry Bonds stuff that his back foot's not coming forward like this. It's just hitting from like right there, and it just kind of stays there. Some of that's timing, some of that's also your forward move. So like you see here, as he's going forward, he's traveling out to 50-50. That's a pretty good forward move there. And when that's happening, he's gaining more ground forward. The back foot has more room to actually release forward. Whereas like a Joey Votto type hitter, Joey Votto, now to this year, he's doing different things than he ever has. I actually love how he's moving right now. But if you look at old Joey Votto, and I liked old Joey Votto too, but when you look, or I guess young Joey Votto, but when you look at him, both heels flat here. Now the back heel starts to come up like right away, right? Like you kind of see that transition where some people would call it heel. We don't teach it. It's just a byproduct of time because this pitch right here is a heater and he's got to get going right away. But you'll see the back foot stay sideways here, but it really doesn't come forward, right? It doesn't rotate and squish the bug, but it kind of just holds the ground. And that's a huge majority because when you watch him from like leg kick here and going down, he was a little wider in the setup and there wasn't as much of a forward move. So someone that might be a little bit more along the lines of making a move out, the backside might come further, opposed to Votto, who's a little wider. He's kind of up to down. He doesn't have as much movement forward with that backside because there's not enough room to do so. If he did that, he'd fall over that way. So it's just a byproduct. It's just kind of important to know that it's like we're not going to force scissor kicks into people, but we're also not going to want to see a lot of guys doing what Votto's doing here to a certain degree in terms of not driving the backside through. We do a drill called kick-throughs, and we'll get into that a little bit more. Kick-throughs are a really exaggerated drill on driving the backside into the ball, but I just wanted to show you Seager's back foot release. Here's a different version of it. This is Carpenter with the Cardinals, and you kind of see he's like a little more 60-40 a little bit with the lower body. You kind of see it. Heads forward, but definitely doesn't look necessarily as like 100% 50-50. But you see that back foot kind of release forward as well, not pop up and spin and squish the bug. So it kind of like begs the question of how do we create that? How do I take a hitter who pops up and maybe spins versus like how these guys are creating a different release of the back foot? Love Miguel Cabrera. Oh, this is that one where that back heel comes up a little early. It's a 92 heater at the top of the zone. It gets going a little bit on foot strike there. But basically what we look for is we look for what's actually starting the swing. And when I was growing up, everyone always said the ground. Now the ground kind of like triggers my core, and that's how we visualize the swing now. But when I was young, we always thought the swing started right from there, as it would start from the foot and then the knee and then the hip and then the rest of the upper body. And in hindsight, it actually starts from here. It starts from the hip, the back hip kind of butt, and then the knee will follow, and then the heel comes off the ground. So it's more of a hip, knee, foot than it is anything else. So like you see a lot of hitters that are like collapsing the back knee and collapsing their backside as they're swinging. They're not transferring a lot of weight. They're not creating that kind of thrust of the butt. You know, I haven't said it much today, but we talk a lot about how the hips don't spin, is we're not actually rotating the hips as a mechanism. That's not what drives our swing. What drives our swing is our spine and our glute. And I have people ask me all the time, well, the hips obviously rotate, so why don't you talk about the hips rotating? And I'm like, well, try not to rotate your hips and swing the bat and see what happens. Like, well, my hips turn. I'm like, exactly. So why would I have to think about my hips if they're going to do it anyways? And it immediately cleans a lot of things up for people. That was kind of one of the things we started to talk about towards the end last week is deceleration. We kind of used the example of JD Martinez, so let's pull him up. So JD Martinez and Mike Trout. Is if you look at Mike Trout, like in terms of his motor and explosiveness and athleticism and like top speeds, he's Ferrari. He's like the fastest car on planet Earth, or one of a few guys that can move as fast as him and as tight as him. But if you compare him to JD Martinez is like a slug. He's like a non-athlete in that realm. He's obviously a great athlete. He's a Major League Baseball player that rakes, but in the terms of his speed of his motor and the explosiveness that he can create in a short amount of time, it's not even on the same planet as Mike Trout. So they both hit 300 plus. They both hit 35, 40 home runs, 110 RBIs off the best pitching on the planet. So obviously they do something similar. Like, what do they do similar that allows them to do that? And the one thing that really stands out with the best hitters in the world is that they stop rotation better than other guys. Is that JD Martinez, Mike Trout, those guys stop their rotation much better than other people. Now, this is a very, very tough pitch here. This is in the World Series. It was off Verlander. It was like a really bad little hanging curveball that he ends up catching here. And obviously in this position up and in, I have the side view here for you. It's going to be a ways down here. But it really is about 6:15. So anybody got any place to be? Got about 5 more minutes or so. I'll kind of walk through this really quick to finish up on this. And answer some questions. But let me find this other video. So because I have the side view and the front view of these swings. It's just way the hell down here.
Yeah, because I think we were looking at the front view.
Yeah, last
We were
week.
talking about it last
Yes, yeah, 100%. So I'm going to pull that up right now. It's just a great concept of what's actually happening and being able to see both sides. Here it is. Boom. So it's that up and in breaking ball, World Series 2018 maybe? I don't know, somewhere in that realm. And you see here at contact, I don't have the rest of the video, it stops at contact there, but you can see that his hips are rotating pretty far here. Now, I would argue that they're still not quite to the pitcher. The offset camera makes it a little bit difficult. This is about as far as he's ever going to rotate the hips, but they're not going to keep rotating after contact. He's actually going to hit the brakes. So what we kind of call deceleration is the brakes, and it kind of stops at contact, and then it also recoils a little bit. We showed that a little bit last week, but that's an up and in pitch here. But then if you compare that to him hitting this down and away slider, do I have side view of it? Where'd the slider go? Ooh, that bothers me. I might have deleted it. Oh, no, it's this one. There it is. This is weird. So this is in the same game. You got RBI single up the middle in the same game, and this is the down and away slider, right? So this is north to south. This is not spinning the hips at all. This is us carrying that, what we call the line. So I'm holding my line. I'm carrying that thing as long as I can, palm up, palm down, to try and catch a slider where, I mean, you see how early he is here on a slider. That slider's like on the outside corner. It's up the middle for a base hit, and he's just holding forever there. The hitters that can do this here, but can't do this here, where we're really tight and it's deeper and it's strong, that if you can only do one of the two, you're going to struggle against something, right? So the guys that can do both, the guys that can stay very tight, catch this pitch deep, it looks out front, but it's really kind of deep. But he catches this thing really tight and deep to the body for pull side home run, and then also the very next at bat, go carry this line and catch a slider fully extended through that ball there. If you can do both of those, you're probably hitting very well. You're going to go pull side air with power as long as you're decently strong, and you're also going to be able to stay on off speed down and away and hold and carry and have good two-strike swings. If you can only do one, I would rather have this ability here, just because I'm going to cover more pitches and more timing windows. I'm not going to be successful pulling the ball in the air on fastballs in. It's just not going to happen. But it's a good example because a lot of people in our world right now are teaching this as the only swing you should ever take. Is they're teaching this tight, I hear a lot of tight turns and a lot of like rotate through contact, and like it's a solution to this pitch here. But you take this exact same swing on slider down and away, you're going to miss it by 3 feet. You got this giant hula hoop hole in your swing that pitchers are just trying to funnel sliders through, and you got no chance. And eventually the game will establish that, and if you don't make the adjustment, you're done. So being able to stop rotation, if you compare the angle on the front view here like we looked at last week, is you see that those hit, I mean, that belt buckle right there is probably pointed at the second baseman, double play depth, and it don't rotate any further. It's done right there. And that's deceleration. That is stopping his hips to basically transfer energy up the chain. So if he stops rotation, it transfers energy up the core and eventually into the barrel. And it's like projectile, right? It's like a slingshot. It's like catapult system. So like a catapult hits that stop, and that's what shoots the projectile. Well, the projectile is the bat. So if I never stop my hips, I never transfer that energy up the chain, then my barrel's not going to go where it wants to go. It's not going to go through the ball. It's going to come off the ball. So that's deceleration. The brakes, stopping rotation, is that decelerating is a lot more important than accelerating. Now, granted, if I'm dealing with 12, 13, 14-year-old kids, like learning to accelerate's just as important, because that's a time in their lives where they're learning to be explosive. They're learning to move faster. And if you're telling, like giving an athlete a governor and telling them to go slower. You know, if I'm talking to somebody that's already a grown man that's explosive and fast, Jordan Justice was one of them. He was exceptionally explosive, like there was no tomorrow. Some of the best bat speed I'd ever seen, but he didn't stop it. It was just this crazy helicopter of bat speed. And when he learned how to stop rotation, he really started to absolutely rake. It's a good example of that. If you've ever seen him, you'd know what I mean. But JD Martinez is not super fast rotator. It's not super explosive, but he rotates his speed and then he stops it on a dime and flat out rakes. So you can even see it in the belt buckle. The belt buckle almost kind of kicks backwards and almost comes back slightly as like a recoil effect in terms of it stops and then comes back slightly, because that's how it's kind of working. And just another example of that back foot staying sideways. The back foot's not spinning in a circle. Now granted, some people's back foot is going to turn further, and sometimes it happens like through here where they're like getting ready to run. That's just trying to get out of the box. Like it has nothing to do with the swing. If it's happening way out here, I don't really care, as long as the hips are stopping on contact rather than coming through. So it's really like the principle of why we talk about not spinning the hips is because if I'm talking about spinning the hips, I can't stop my hips. But if I'm never trying to rotate my hips and I'm letting my core and my backside do it naturally, my hips will stop naturally. They just stop as a solution. And having the ability to stop your rotation at different times naturally is a solution to different pitches at different angles. So a slider coming in, I got to stop it here at this point without thinking. It just needs to happen. Or a fastball here away, I can stop it at a different time. It needs to be natural, but it gives me more solutions to pitches at different angles at different timing windows. And that's what it's all about, is we want to give hitters the most amount of solutions possible to hit a ball hard. And that's really the end goal. So it's good stuff. We have a lot of good drills for decel, a lot of good thoughts for it. And we'll kind of add to that. But is there any questions on that? Stuff gets a little confusing with the lower body and decel and driving the backside. There's a lot of words there. But
You'll probably hit on as we keep going.
yeah, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Could you go over catching it deep again? Because I know we talked about your definition of catching deep is different than what most of us have talked about.
Yeah, that was the funny story from last week, right?
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
the Jake Lamb told me I ruined him for 3 months when I told him I was like, man, you're hitting it so deep and out front. And he's like, what? What do you mean? So deep and out front is to me is like when you constitute making contact. The tee is a great example on this. If I put the tee out front, I guess I could start off where most people would call it deep. So if I get to a stride position here and the tee's like, you know, really deep here, right? Like I'm beat here. And you go to the ball, like sure, I'm making deep contact here, but I'm not going to move my body. Now I'm not making deep contact. And then all of a sudden, I move that thing way out in front like I'm pretty early, and I get to the ball fully extended. I'm not making deep contact here. But if I get to that thing by holding and carrying, now I'm hitting the ball well in front of my front foot, but I am making deep contact here. So to me, that the context of the ball getting deep is not what deep contact is to me. Deep contact to me is how I get to it, right? Am I getting to it by expending my angles and losing all my bat speed? Because really extension is deceleration. Extension, your barrel's slowing down through extension. So if I'm extending early and I'm going out to balls by what people would call a pushy swing, that ends up being very weak. So sure, you're out in front, but you're not hitting the ball out in front in a strong position. So that's the whole deep and out front, and how deep is kind of a misconceived concept. I mean, I remember growing up, I still do it with some hitters, the Barry Bonds drill, where he would kind of catch it off his back hip. You just throw him a ball like this, and he would just kind of catch it off the hip. It's a decent drill for hitters that really like to go get it. You know, you're like, okay, we got to feel like we're catching it off the hip. I actually use that terminology quite a bit of trying to play catch with the ball rather than trying to hit the ball. And it kind of goes into our concept earlier of like if I'm short to ball and I'm swinging at the ball and it turns into a slider, I'm out. But if I'm just really trying to play catch with it, now I'm playing behind it. Now I have that adjustability on not only depth, but also late, early, and on time. But connection ball is really a good drill for that. The hitters on the connection ball that would be basically out front but not deep, is they're losing that connection, elbow, hand, shoulder, really early, right? And oftentimes that is happening not because of the top hand, it's happening because the bottom hand is pulling this hand away from this. So like imagine that if I don't pull my hand here, my top hand can work and hold as I rotate my spine, which is my motor, opposed to if I'm here and just pull on my bottom hand and just pulling that away from that angle. Bottom hand dominant, front side moves. You hear me talk a lot about front side moves versus back side moves. So we want everything to come from the back side. Top hand, back of my core, hip, posterior chain. We want everything from the back side, nothing from the front side. Front side gets us in trouble. So probably good for the day. Is there any questions? Any more? Good question. I like that though. Dialed. Money.
Do we get a refund if all our kids don't hit over 400?
No. What's the old saying is that if we could do it for them, we would. Yeah, the 400 mark. That used to be like normal back then when I was playing. Everyone hit over 400. I don't know. I would say the bats.
Yeah.
It's got to be the bats or the over instruction or something. I don't know. But yeah, the game changer one. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. And pitching is definitely better. Yeah. Yeah, everyone just chuck it. Just let it fly a little bit. But
Umpiring's still the same.
yeah. I would argue it might be a little worse, man. I don't know. I don't think they're better. That's for sure. Man, it's rough. My neighbor, he lives right behind me. He's been an umpire for quite a few years now. I forget what organization he's with. It's NBUA or something, but his name's Bill, and he's a really nice gentleman. And I finally had him at a game, and I was like, oh, it's going to ruin my relationship with my neighbor. I think it's going to be tough. But he gave me like all the calls. I felt really bad. I still remember Jay Buhner. I worked with Gunnar Buhner for a few years, and Jay would come in the cage, and he was always telling stories about when he was showing up with, remember O'Brien? Yeah. So he played for O'Brien for a few years, and Jay would show up, and Jay was like, I had to stop showing up because all the umpires after every call would look at me. Like, oh no, that's not what you want. Definitely not. But yeah, so I think next week what we can do is we can get Google Drive should be up and running by next week for sure. But what we'll do is we'll bring like McKinley or somebody in here. You know, we can bring Swallow in and bring him in, let him hit, and just kind of go through some drills and talk about things. We can film, kind of break down some film on here and kind of go over kind of what we see and why we see it, and just kind of maybe, you know, utilize some of the drills we did today and just kind of see it in action, which just helps learn from a different aspect than just seeing my out of shape 5'8" ass do it. So you're bringing me donuts. That's killing me. Yeah, of course, you guys. My pleasure. My pleasure.